Hello there, and welcome to the Easter special of the r slash let's not meet subreddit. I have once again narrated some stories from this subreddit, and they're sure to be spooky, and I hope you enjoy them. As with the holiday, I've kept it to the theme of Easter, and without further ado, grab yourself a snack, sit back and relax, and hope that tonight will not be your last. This happened to me about 4 years ago when I was 21. So, it's Easter, broad daylight, maybe around 11 a.m. I'm in the fashion district of my big city, which is relatively safe during daytime. I'd never had any actual run-ins with crazy, even though I would see homeless people and unwell people all the time talking to themselves. I'm normally pretty good at keeping my head down and sensing danger before it happens, or so I thought. Anyways, so I'm looking for a store with shoes. I pass a homeless woman who's either on drugs or unwell, or both, and I make note of her, but ignore her because it's broad daylight and it's Easter and there's people walking around. She's sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, yelling to herself. I go into a store a couple blocks down, finish up there, pass her again to go to another store, and when I go to pass her a third time, that's the last straw for her. She's decided she knows me from somewhere. I see her get up and start to yell at me. "Stupid bitch! You thought I wouldn't know it was you." And she charges me. It all happened so fast. I thought I was having a leisurely stroll on Easter, so I didn't have my car keys out yet, or my pepper spray. I start to run to my car and she's behind me. Now I'm kind of against my car and turn around. She's right there. I size her up and she's very dirty and has sores, and I think to myself that I definitely don't want to fight her. Not that I can fight anyways, but I figure now is not the time to learn. I also think to myself that if I stay by my car, she's going to damage it in the process of trying to attack me. I can't find my keys in time. She goes to sucker punch me in the back of the neck as I duck and run, and she barely misses me. This is all within 10 seconds of it happening. Nobody is helping, by the way, despite it being a busy street. I'm screaming. I'm lucky enough to accidentally run into the last store I had been in. If it had been another store that didn't know me, I think they would have kicked me out for causing a scene. I live in a big city and have had issues like this where shopkeepers won't help because they don't want the drama, the drama I had nothing to do with, but I digress. I run in crying and telling him about the lady. The lady runs in after me and I hide behind the counter with him telling him I need to get to my car and she won't let me and she's tried to hit me, etc. He must have known her from the neighborhood and he held her back for me as I got into my car and drove off safely. The whole time she was still screaming and trying to get around him to me. I made it to my family's Easter thing safe but avoided that part of the city for a couple of years. I've always wanted to go back and thank that man. I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't there or how I would have gotten to my car. This event took place quite a few years ago, so unfortunately I don't remember everything that happened. Anyways, this happened to me when I was around 4 to 5 years old on Easter Sunday. My family always gathers at my grandmother's house to celebrate holidays, birthdays, etc. As we do every holiday, my mother and I started our hour-long trip to her house. My mother prefers to live away from all the city commotion, which explains the long drive. We were probably around 20 minutes away from our destination when my mom noticed that we were a little low on gas. So we pulled into this old, almost rustic looking gas station with just a handful of customers inside. It was red and white with a few festive decorations outside and lots of Easter stickers on the two large glass doors. My mom, having taught me not to talk to strangers nor open car doors to anyone but her, trusted me enough to leave me in the car alone as she went inside briefly to pay for gas. She told me she would be right back before going into the gas station. It felt nice that day, so the windows in the car were down so we could feel the breeze while driving instead of the AC. While I was waiting on my mom, I remember adjusting the colorful paper clippings in my Easter basket next to me, then looking out the backseat window. When I looked over, I saw a tall, older man approaching my window. He crouched down slightly and looked at me. "Hi there. What's your name?" I remember him saying. At this moment, I remembered that I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, so I told the man that my mom says I shouldn't speak to strangers. And then he replied with, "Well, we can be friends then. My name's Charlie. And now that you know, I guess I'm not a stranger, huh?" At the time, I thought he was right. In my mind, I thought, since a stranger is someone you don't know, this man wasn't a stranger anymore because I knew his name. The man and I had a short conversation that I don't quite remember. All I remember is him telling me I had a nice Easter basket. At this point, I started to get a sick feeling in my stomach, but being a child, of course, I didn't know why. My mom then walked out of the gas station and noticed the man immediately and began approaching the car quickly, asking the man what he thinks he's doing. The man seems to panic and he pulls my door handle violently. He quickly realized that it was locked, thankfully, and proceeded to reach into my window and grab me by one of my wrists in an attempt to pull me out. This obviously scared me a lot, causing me to panic and pull against him on instinct, which caused him to let go and take off running. My mom quickly ran to the car and I unlocked the doors. She grabbed me and pulled me into an almost painful bear hug, then inspected me closely, repeatedly asking if I was okay. I ended up with a slight bruise and redness on my arm where he grabbed me, but other than that, I was just shaken up. The reality of what had just happened set in at this moment, and I remember just crying and holding on to my mom right after I said I was okay. I don't remember anything after this point, but I recently asked my mom about it, and she said that she called the police immediately after. To this day, my mom still says that this was the most frightening moment of her life, and claims that if she had gotten there any later and came back to an empty car, she wouldn't have been able to live with herself. I had just gotten out of a really shitty relationship with a guy I had been living with for 3 years. He was a really pretty boy who looked like Johnny Depp, but he liked to steal all my money while I was at work and throw crazy parties. I got tired of his stealing and coming home to emo kids asleep all over my house, so I left him. I didn't want anything but my stuff, and I let him keep the house and cars I bought him. I just wanted my sanity back. I moved back in with my Grammy. I'm her favorite grandchild, and she spoiled me as she does. I had recently reconnected with my best friend that I had known since kindergarten, Chris. I was hanging out with Chris on my back porch one morning when the subject of boys gets brought up. Chris is gay, and we often talk about boys together. He asked if I was seeing anybody, and I tell him that I'm not. It had only been a few months since I left the money leech, and I didn't know if I was ready to trust anyone. Chris said that he knew the perfect man for me. I said that I don't think there is such a thing. He begs me to go meet this guy. I reluctantly sigh and tell my granny that I'm going on an adventure with Chris. We talked as we drove, and he tells me that this guy has been in love with me since we were kids. He told me it was his little boy, Quinn, that used to follow me around. I told him that I thought Quinn was a lot younger than us. He told me that Quinn is just short, like me. He called Quinn and told me to talk to him. I do, and he seems really sweet but a little airheaded. We show up at his house and he's really pretty. He was also very sweet, has a good job, his own car, and owns his own company. We start hanging out a lot and eventually start dating. He buys me presents like nice jewelry and Prada sunglasses. He told me his girl only deserved the best. I told him I couldn't accept all these gifts, but he would just dump them in my car or purse when I wasn't looking, so I just learned to take them. He always wanted to call me and talk for hours and wanted to call me when I got home from his house. I thought he was sweet and just wanted to be sure I got home safely. Reality set in rather quickly. He introduced me to his entire family within a couple of days of us dating. I usually don't introduce guys to my family until we're serious, but whatever. Upon meeting his mother, I learned that it's her house and he lives there with her. I also learned that he has no job other than doing odd jobs for his dad. I was speechless. He also lied about being my age. I was like 24 and he had just turned 18 like the day or so before we started dating. I was so upset I didn't know how to feel. He begs me not to leave him and take him to my play rehearsal the next day. He showed up in my driveway just as I was leaving for the theater. Chris drove him there and tells me we need to sort our shit out. He said if Quinn was gay, he would be all over him and not to leave him over a few small lies. The whole drive is awkward. I don't want to talk to this guy. I want him gone. He pulls out a diamond ring and tries to propose to me. I tell him no, but he slides the rock on my finger anyway. He said I need to think about it. I go to the theater and shit just goes downhill from there. He embarrassed me in front of my friends with his ignorance and childishness and threw a fit because my other best friend Mikey gave me a piggyback ride. He storms out and then his mother started calling to check up on him. I decided I was done. After rehearsal, I got a friend to go with me to drive him home. I tried to give his ring back, but he won't take it. I leave and go to a bar with my fellow actors. I told him that was why I had to take him home so early. Driving back, I see flashing lights in my rearview mirror and hear yelling. Chris and Quinn are following me. I pull into the bar and Chris throws Quinn at myself and each other and yells that we need to talk. I break up with Quinn and he starts throwing a fit. I walk into the bar with my friend. I spend the night at Mikey's for a few days. When I return home, I have tons of harassing phone calls. He called me and my grandparents every few hours. He even had Chris help. Everywhere I went, he was there. He stalked me out home, made me run from a theater during a movie, and followed my car. Chris helped him do all of this. He pulled a gun on my family when we were outside during Easter. I was helping the little kids hunt eggs. He cruised by several times and then pulled his gun. He creeped by with his gun pointed at us. I filed a restraining order that day. I moved in with Mikey so he would leave my grandparents alone. I went nowhere without at least 2 guys with me at all times. I thought any minute he would come and kill me. I felt hunted like a deer in the woods. I was lucky. He shut up the car of his next girlfriend while her 2-year-old daughter was inside. I was damn lucky. This past Easter, my dad, a pilot for a cargo shipping company, was in town and offered to take me across the inlet for a nice dinner. As his co-pilot were away for their families and they were also invited to join and gladly did. While I waited for them to validate their tickets in the ferry terminal, I spotted an unlikely duo standing by the door. 2 guys, late 20s at most. One large and oafish, the other shorter and movie star gorgeous. I looked just in time to see Oaf nod in my direction, and MS make a face that can only be described as meh. I'd fuck her after a few beers. They stood close to us in the terminal. Keep in mind, this ferry carries hundreds of people at a time. And I told my dad about the nod. He laughed and continued talking to his co-pilots next to us. Every time I looked over, MS was already looking at me. I shook my head. We sat on opposite ends of the ferry, often MS debarking before us. I was glad they were gone. We walked up the street from the terminal to the restaurant, and when I turned back to take in the view of the city across the water, was surprised to find the duo had somehow ended up behind us and were slowly walking up the street. I didn't think too much on it. It was a busy area and lots of pubs were around. I did think about it more when they walked by the restaurant, peering intently into the front window, where we were standing waiting for a table. They smiled, exchanged words with each other, and kept moving. I let out a sigh of relief until they walked back by from the opposite direction. They stopped. They leaned on a bike rack in front of the restaurant for a few minutes and then left. MS stared over his shoulder the whole time. Over dinner, I informed my dad and his co-pilots of the events that had transpired without them even realizing. They laughed about it and eventually had me laughing about it too. We'd never see the pair of guys again. 3 hours later, as we waited for the return ferry, I was talking to our company, recounting a story from earlier at dinner when I spotted the pair over my dad's shoulders. They were looking my way. Scratch that. Staring. I quickly informed the guys. They were shocked and kept looking back at the pair. There was a miniature showdown in the ferry terminal as each party stared each other down from opposite ends. I ended up getting a 3-man escort home that night. If you're out there, Jensen Ackles and Shrek lookalikes, let's not meet again. I'm a 26-year-old girl that lives alone in a basement apartment with my dog. Last Easter, my dog was only about 3 months old at the time. I took her out to do her thing before going to bed. This was around 1:30 in the morning. We went to the yard. Pitch black, the streetlights were kind of far away. She's doing her thing and I'm talking to her. I look up and look into my neighbor's yard. No fence, just 2 medium-sized trees are between our yards. And I see this tall man, I'm guessing around 2 meters tall. This guy is standing around 3 to 4 meters away from me and just stands there and stares. All of a sudden, he starts walking from the yard towards the street. I do the same. My front door was open and I didn't want to risk anything. When I come to my door, I see the guy. He stands in front of my neighbor's house and he just stares back. I stood there for about 2 minutes, just trying to see what he was doing. Then he starts walking up the stairs of the house that looks like he's going in. At that point, I decide I'd just have a creepy neighbor and go into my apartment. I sit down on the couch and continue watching TV. Then I start seeing someone blocking a beam of light that comes in through the curtains. And again, it gets blocked. It was like someone was walking in my yard. I mute the TV, but hear nothing. The weather was very cold and the grass was crispy. I stand up and lift my curtains. Note that I live in the basement, and there he is. Our faces were too close to each other's, on the opposite side of the window. I managed to keep my cool and stared back. The guy just stood up and walked slowly away in the crispy grass. Went to my neighbor's yard again. I freaked out and called the cops. And now, maybe 1 month ago, I'm watching TV with the dog. All of a sudden, she starts growling, teeth showing. There he was, again, same window. Now, I always have the curtains down, have a security system, and always take a flashlight with me to the yard if it's dark. This story happened years ago, but I find myself coming back to it often. A little more than a decade ago, I was a 19-year-old student at a small Midwest college. I was still taking my general courses and happened to have an evening psychology course with 40 to 50 fellow students. We broke into small groups to discuss readings and assignments on a regular basis. That's where I met a fellow student named James. There was nothing creepy about James, and there were no more than casual classroom acquaintances. This comes into play later on. I have a relative who is a Catholic priest, and we would travel to his home on the Easter holiday to celebrate with him and sometimes guests of his inviting. One particular Easter, he invited a colleague of his. The colleague was also planning on becoming a priest and was learning from the particular church he was assigned to. He came off as mostly a quiet and focused man. Nothing out of the norm for someone who was a third wheel at a family dinner. The day wore on, there were card games and drinks. It wasn't a secret that this man enjoyed having a beer or two. I found it a little odd that he was drinking heavily, but then again, so were others. I remember leaving the get-together and shaking hands with him, an awkward interaction at best, and that was what I thought the last I would hear about him. Flash forward a few months and there is news of a murder in a funeral home not far from the small Midwest college I attend. The murder goes unsolved for quite some time. The part that hit home with the murder, James was a victim. The same James I had psychology class with. He was interning to be a mortician and was shot at the funeral home. A number of months later, I see news reports and read articles on a big break in the case. The same priest that I had met at Easter dinner had been assigned to a new parish. The new parish had mixed feelings about his demeanor. Apparently, the director of the funeral home was about to confront the priest with the allegations. Knowing this, the priest went to the funeral home and murdered the director, along with James. Not only did I shake the murderer's hand, I had also known one of the victims. It still gives me the creeps sometimes. This happened in my 4th year at university. I had moved from abroad on an exchange year and was living in student accommodation in England. The building was an old factory converted into student housing. It had 4 floors and was square, with a courtyard in the center. Each floor had a connecting corridor that would run from one side of the building to the other. The corridor was then separated in 8 self-contained flats of 4 bedrooms. The separations between the flats were locked fire doors. These doors could only be opened by breaking a fire seal or having a master key, which would set off an alarm, as experienced in the first few weeks when students were trying to sneak into other flats without having to go through the courtyard. Each fire door had a see-through window from one flat to another. It was sometime in the spring break of 2005. All the local students had gone home for Easter, but I couldn't afford for the plane ticket back to my parents. I was alone on my floor except for a few students in another aisle of the building who were sharing a flat together. I was actually enjoying having the whole flat for myself, without the endless parties and general mess that comes with shared student accommodation. Actually having time to write my dissertation and maybe grab a decent night's sleep without anyone screaming or switching corridor lights in the middle of the night. The bedroom doors had big gaps underneath and the light could wake you. And as my bedroom was next to the fire door dividing the flats, I could enjoy my flatmates and neighbors' antics. That evening, I had watched a movie on my computer with the lights out. Probably Silence of the Lamb or Big Fish, as these were the only 2 DVDs that I owned at the time. Then I turned off the computer and went to bed. Now, remember, the whole floor is empty of students. No lights coming from corridors or kitchens, no lights in my bedroom, and blackout curtains drawn. My flatmates are with their family and there's no noise in their building. I am confident that I have locked the main entrance and my bedroom door, and I do not need to worry about the fire doors as they are locked and alarmed. I felt safe. How wrong I was. In the middle of the night, I wake up and feel a presence in the room. It's hard to describe as I actually cannot see, but on instinct I do not move or make a noise, well, except for my heart pounding. I hold my breath and wait. Now I have tinnitus, which is the constant ringing in the ears, so I cannot hear faint noises, but trust me, I didn't need to hear. I actually felt the person in the room move, and I knew, just knew, that they were standing right next to my bed. Fear takes over. I stand up on my bed and scream the loudest and biggest scream that I can muster. I am ready to pounce on the person who has their back at me as I can now make out the faint light coming from a tiny torch or phone screen. But they are faster than me. In one jump, they reach my bedroom door, and with another jump, they are out through the fire door. I grab my phone on my bedside table and run out of my bedroom, unlock my flat door, and sprint directly to the security office a block away, in my pajamas and bare feet. I talk to the security guard on duty who doesn't believe me. Through the fire door, you say? But the alarm didn't go off. I still make him come back to the flat and check. The fire door is unlocked and the security guard proceeds to lock it again, then open it with his master key, no alarm sounding. "I'll have the engineer check it in the morning," he said. It also made him check the CCTV cameras, but we couldn't see anything or anybody running out in the courtyard. "Go back to bed, love. Must have been a nightmare." I know it wasn't a nightmare. How could you explain the fire door being unlocked? And I know I had locked my bedroom door. And if no one exited the building, did it mean that the person was still within the building? From that point on, and until the end of the academic year, I did not sleep without my phone on me, and I pushed my chair against my bedroom door to prevent anyone opening it. I also learned to love my noisy flatmates. It meant I wasn't alone. I never found out who it was. My flatmates thought that it was a previous student with a double of the flat keys looking for loots in which they thought could be an empty building, and sometimes joked that it was a secret admirer who had come to observe me in my sleep. We'll never know, and honestly, I prefer not to. This happened back about a week and a half before Easter. For some background, I am a 29-year-old female, about 5'1", about 120 pounds. However, most people mistake me for a 15 or 16-year-old girl. The youngest I had ever been mistaken for was about 9, but that was by my nanny's best friend who hadn't seen me in years and just assumed I was one of her great-grandchildren. It was actually quite funny and we all had a good laugh. Anyways, on to the weird encounter. My mom needed to go to Walmart to pick up a few things that my dad had asked her to get and some stuff they needed in preparation for their upcoming trip to West Virginia. My mom, dad, one of my sisters, her husband, and my 4 nephew and nieces were going for Easter weekend. This would be my mom's first time going, and she wasn't really happy that they planned to go the trip on Easter weekend, but they assured her they would have back clearly by Sunday, so we could still celebrate and have Easter dinner with my 2 other sisters. When we got there, my mom got a basket and headed off to the hair care and pharmacy section, and I told her I was gonna go look in the bedding department to see if they still had any fleece blankets left over that they had on sale for like $2. So she said that if I had got done before her, she would still be around that area and to look for her there. I managed to find a few blankets left and got them and headed off to find my mom to stick them in the basket. She was right there. She was still in the same section and seemed like she would have been there forever. Across the way there was where they had all of their Easter candy and decorations, so I told her I was gonna go see if they had any of those popping animal themed candy dispensers. I love those things. My sister gave me years ago as a sort of joke for Easter, and coincidentally I loved it. So she has been giving me one every year since for Easter, Christmas, and whatever else holidays they make them for. I have quite the collection and love getting them. It is a long-standing and fun tradition between me and my sister. When I get over to the Easter section, there's no one there but me, and I'm relieved. Because most of the time people are flocked there in the seasonal sections like a moth to a flame and refuse to move from their spots to let anyone else get a look. So I'm browsing through and check out the candy when This guy comes around the corner into the aisle I'm in. He's a nice looking young guy. He looks to be about 19 or 20. At first all seems well. I'm going on looking at all this stuff when I get this feeling as if he's staring at me. So I move down the aisle pretending to look at stuff while trying to gauge if he's actually staring at me or not, and he is. I thought to myself, okay, he's just a young guy and probably thinks I'm a young girl around his age and he's just checking me out or something. After another minute or two of this, it becomes clear he isn't looking at anything in the aisle but me. And every time I glance his way, he averts his gaze really quickly and pretends to be checking out a product. At this point, it just becomes weird for me. If he would have said something, I think maybe I would have felt more comfortable, but he kept staring holes right through me, and it began to make me feel uneasy. While he was pretending to look at the product on the shelf and trying to look intently interested in it, I seized the chance to quickly move around to the aisle on the other side. He didn't see which way I went, and when I was on the other side of the aisle for a bit, I felt that maybe I was just being too paranoid, and that's when I look up to see him standing right next to me. Never heard him or seen him enter, and boom, he's right there all up in my space. I'm kind of startled by this, and then my creep meter goes up, and I start to get the heebie-jeebies and this feeling of something isn't right with this dude. So I move on down the aisle, trying not to show any fear, and a couple of seconds and he's moving right along with me. So I quickly turn around as if I'm looking at something on the shelves behind me, and he does the same. About that time, thank God, some woman comes down the aisle with her buggy and distracts him, more like startles him. So I move to another aisle. I'm in there for a bit before he finds me again, and he slowly starts inching his way closer and closer to me. He's wearing a hooded sweatshirt, and as he gets closer, he starts putting his hands under his shirt, and it sounds like he's fiddling with a belt buckle, all the while stealing glances at me. At this time, I'm panicking inside and trying to move away from him, but he follows me everywhere. I look him straight in the face, and he's just staring blankly at me, all the while still doing whatever it is he's doing under his shirt. About that time, both the woman from the other aisle and my mom come in, and I'm so relieved. My mom tells me that she's going to the food department, and I just say, I'll go with you. At that point, I wasn't about to go anywhere by myself in that store with that weirdo on my heels. As we leave, he's acting all normal, as if he wasn't doing anything creepy, and picks up a bag of random candy and walks to the other end of the aisle. Finally, I feel relieved, and that I'm in the clear. So on the way to the food section, I remembered I needed to stop by the pet department and get my dog Otis a bag of his favorite treats. So my mom continues on to the drink aisle. As I pick up a bag of dog biscuits, I look to my left, and to my horror, there's this guy again. I'm thinking to myself, why? He's been following me this whole time, and now he's got me alone again. At this point, I'm really wishing we had come to Walmart when it was like rush hour and the place was packed. At least I wouldn't find myself so isolated and alone in aisles with this creepy dude. I get my dog treats and walk as fast as I can out of the aisle and headed for the drinks section where my mom said she would be. Thank God she's there, and I stick my treats in the basket and decide I'm not going anywhere else in that store alone. Throughout the whole time we were there, he was in every single aisle we went in, just staring me down and looking for any opportunity where he might find me by myself again. But I never gave him the chance. We got our stuff and I went to check out. He tried to check out in the line 2 lanes away in hope of following us out, but thank God the little old lady in front of him picked up something that didn't give a price tag, and she held up that line. He couldn't go anywhere else. By that time, we were finished checking out and got the heck out of there. As we were loading the stuff in the car, I saw him come out of the front door and just standing on the sidewalk scanning to see where I went. But he never saw me because I hid on the other side of the car, and he gave up. I told my mom about it on the way home, and she agreed with me that he was acting strangely in a stalker-like manner, and that he very well must have thought I was just some 15 to 16-year-old girl alone. Who knows what his intentions were, in fact. He may very well have followed me out and tried to kidnap me, but who knows, and I hope no one ever has to find out.